Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. Today with me, Peter Lang from AVA Acquisitions, an interesting, unique agency, I'm going to call it, Peter. And we're going to unpack a whole bunch of different things. Peter's the chief of M&A for AVA. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Peter is in the south of France for this podcast. Thanks for the extra effort.
All it does is sound more prestigious than it really is. The French are no different than everyone else, except they are very different than everyone else.
Very true. Very true. Listen, so we've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about what it is that you do and what AVA is doing in the industry. Can you describe it for us?
Certainly. AVA is the brainchild of my two business partners and I. And if I take a step back before AVA, I've been in the agency game, more specifically the roll-up agency game, since 2010. And my track record was the traditional thing. You know, we acquire you and you change teams. You're wearing new jerseys, new colors, and optimistically and not always successfully, cultural integration was a part of that. And when we got to a point of doing our roll-up where we were looking for a better way, I had the fortunate opportunity to be close to Tom Shipley. Tom Shipley in 2020 exited his business and then raised $100 million from two B sources to do Amazon aggregation. And, you know, he moved to Austin. And Todd, if we ever get you down to Austin, you'll be doing with us what he and I were doing, which is riding bikes, running, and doing fun things outdoors.
It's pretty weird in Austin from what I'm told.
Kind of what we do. And unfortunately, private equity as an owner means, sharp elbows and a lot of hands involved in the business. So Tom was taken off the scene. But we kept close when we were talking about what was happening in aggregation. And during that time, I launched my course on M&A. So I teach and lecture on programmatic agency M&A. It's been something of a passion project since I was in high school. So I've been in this game for a while. And I came across a gentleman for my course named Felix Velarde. And goodness, Todd, if I thought agencies were a horse of a different color, my formerly blue-haired, dynamic British business partner wrote the book on scaling and running agencies called Scale at Speed. And I reached out to him and thought, this is amazing. You mean I don't have to integrate? You mean I don't have to worry about the operational efficiencies post-deal? I could just run a scaling program that he had been running for the previous 8 years. And through some persuasive back and forth, he agreed to join me in what we later called AVA. And towards the tail end of 2021, when we were forming this idea and this theory that we could build groups of brands and put them together, Tom came available. And when Tom comes available, you typically say yes, because Tom likes to solve things by adding zeros to them. And so the three of us met in Austin, beginning of 2021, and we formed AVA. And AVA's mission is to do agency aggregation different. And we all came from various sources. A veteran of agency, which is Felix, wrote the book on scaling agencies. And then Tom.
You said the book title quickly because it rolls off the tongue. It's Scale at Speed.
Scale at Speed. And it does exactly what it says on the tin.
Yes, it does.
And
yes, it does.
Now, Felix will attest that it's nothing new. And none of the agency is new. It's 150 years old. And aggregation and roll-up has been around for a while. So oftentimes with the types of companies we're targeting, which is between 500,000 and about 3 million-ish in EBITDA, there's a lot of owners and prospective sellers reinventing the wheel, right? Solving typical agency service problems. And it helps when you have the veterans in the space who have done it. So we formed AVA. And as an aggregator, it's helpful to know you don't start until you do your first acquisition. The rest of it is just consolidating capital, raising capital, and then going to market and prospective sellers and getting to LOI, getting to multiple LOIs, finding the right fit, and then closing. So last year in June, we closed on our first acquisition and then built a team. We now have a 25-person team. That's our corporate back office. That includes what I shepherd, which is our M&A and due diligence integration and management office. And from there, we staffed up the back office, are running our 2Y3X process, which is the commercial program of scale at speed. And again, it was simple. The theory is, can we do agency scaling better than the holding companies, better than a lot of strategics, without all the integration and erosion of human capital? So we've been active. We're approaching around 10 million in top line revenue and dance around 4-ish EBITDA, which is in our space a good platform to begin with.
Yeah, that's a great margin.
Yeah, when you know how to run agencies and you had veterans around you, and then you have people who have all run agencies. Like when we built our agency team, it was, you've run an agency before, you've run an agency before, you know exactly what all these owners have been facing. And can we create a growth solution that, removes the discount factors, lifts the burden, takes off many of the hats that were worn by the owner, and here we are.
So we're early in, we're May, June, but it's early stages in what AVA is going to grow up to be. And it sounds like it's an opportunity for an entrepreneur in the agency space to plug into a bigger infrastructure and then stay on board and continue to do what they have been doing. Is that the profile?
Don't want to roll credits on us, but yeah, and get second bite and third bite of the apple. Most of the owners who are interested in us either have very experienced seasoned team that they don't have a succession team fully baked around. So they're clearly running the show, at least from a client service perspective, and maybe business development, but it's not fully operational without the owner. And so they see us as a partner in taking that next step for succession. Also, 37 agencies in a row, we've in 2 years, 3x revenue, and with in turn 3xing profit.
So let me double click on that. Can you explain that to me? The 37 agencies where you've doubled or tripled?
Yeah. So Scale at Speed is the book. That book was written from a commercial program that Felix ran and now is a part of our ecosystem. It's called 2Y3X. Any agency can reach out to 2Y3X. We have a wonderful managing director, and they can have a commercial scaling program.
So I can just go hire those guys. I don't have to sell to you. I can just go hire those guys and they'll help me build my business.
Yes. And from our perspective, sometimes sellers come to us and they're not ready. And when I say they're not ready, it's because their current size isn't going to give them that life-changing economic event. And so, there's a good opportunity for people to go through the commercial program with the 2Y3X sides of our portfolio. And then we keep an eye on them. From our vantage point, it gives us the EBITDA, gives us the confidence that they know how to scale. Additionally, a little biased, I like to keep an eye on people. And oftentimes, the first time we meet someone, I'm keen to keep an eye on them for maybe 12 months and see how they progress and see how they evolve. In this year, or about a year that we've been running the newest form of aggregation in AVA, we also launched Scale at Speed Media, which is the media company behind our holding company, which is Scale at Speed Capital. And our media company hosts events for agency owners. And the idea behind building an ecosystem is extending the impact. We acquire EBITDA, we acquire culturally aligned businesses with owners who understand the second bite, the third bite, and how that is going to impact themselves and their staff and their team. But that wasn't where we wanted to stop. So we launched our live events, we host about 30 to 40 agencies a few times a year, and we teach them exactly what we do. And what we found is the mysterious buyer, whether that be traditional holding companies that are private equity backed or capital market, or new acquirers who are entering the market in private equity. Most sellers don't know what it's like behind the veil. And for even us, right? That's why I'm here, Todd, right? It's an opportunity for us to share in a domain They get a sense of who we are and how we do things, because deals are done between two people, and those two people have to trust what the future represents. And so what we found, if we can get in front of you and we can show you what we do and show you how we do it, pull our team, put our deal team, put our managing directors, our VP of sales, our head of process, our HR, our attorney, put them on stage. You can ask them questions. They teach and educate. So there's potentially an alignment. It just makes it a lot easier, right? At the end of the day.
So let me ask this, because I know you've been looking at a lot of agencies, but you've also helped a whole bunch of them scale like you described. Are there 2 or 3 things, if somebody comes into you and hires you, could you predict the 2 or 3 things that if you did these now, you would get an immediate lift from? Are they almost always the same?
So you're asking me what are the things I look for arbitrage? Yeah. Well, thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
Yes. So happy to share. We actually have a 2Y3X, 2 years, 3X revenue, a scale at speed assessment. And there's a few things that we have every seller do. We've had them do this for many years. It's one, take that assessment, because we need to know, can we, in a span of 2 years, see the type of growth that makes the investment, a solid one.
And is there, do you guys charge a fee for that assessment?
No, it's complimentary. If you go to the 2y3x.com website, people can take that assessment. And this ties to what our first, I would say, major discount factor is.
And for, just so that you know, for listeners, that link will be in the show notes. So you can go to your website, or you can go to secondbitepodcast.com and you'll find the link there.
And in this assessment, what we're trying to determine is simply, are the common things that are typically identified as discount factors present, right? And discount factors are things that hurt the overall value of your business, period. And from our perspective, one of the major discount factors is not having a team running the company versus the owner. Now, we call this in Scale at Speed, Felix's book, a growth lab team. Essentially means there's 6 people, and they're not middle management. They're not executives. They're represented from every layer of the organization. You can have a graphic designer, a developer, you can have an operator, you can have anyone. HR does not need to be just the leadership team. And the reason for this is most agencies are optimizing for their current state. And it's the owner who is breaking that current state for a vision. And that is what misses when we buy it away from an owner. Day in and day out, you miss the person who's driving the company forward, and from an acquirer that does not run the business for you. That's not, we're not buying it to intervene and get our hands into the day-to-day. We're the type of acquirer that comes in, removes bottlenecks, moves work to a centralized back office, and we need the people who've been on the front lines telling us where they want this to go. And that's a very different feel if you've ever sold to a larger company and then you're ported in. So we look for about 5 to 6 people who can make up that growth lab team, who have experience. Open book management is helpful for that, right? P&L. And so we're trying to find, is the company big enough, have enough people who've been there long enough to be that succession team? The second one is owner-operated sales. Number one thing that hurts the majority of sellers and then ties them to earnouts that they don't typically stick around for is having to sell for the new owner. And time again, we met sellers who, although they say the right things during the pageantry of brokerage or selling, because they're coached by people like Todd pretty well, they don't like having a boss. And so the key is to make sure you're not the one selling. And that is very hard if you're under 5 million in revenue. And even we see it even at 10 million, we see it at 20 million. There's still sellers who are too involved.
I was just going to say and it's not because you said it, it's hard to transition as if, it's hard. It is, I hear all the time. I hear 2 things. number one, we're going to hire a sales guy. And in the history of business, I don't think a sales guy or woman is the solution. I will say this, private equity has never echoed those words. Private equity is going to build a sales function, which is multiple salespeople, because I know some of them are going to leave. Because selling is really hard. And if I'm all by myself selling, it's brutal.
Yeah. So typically the general rule of thumb is you need to have 2 people to make it competitive. And then if you're in a sales organization or a sales function, you're usually terminating low performers every year. And you're setting the right expectation for that. That is a sales organization, a mature one at that. And setting that expectation for how the company will perform over time should not be the owner's job. It needs to be the salespeople who are commissioned and compensated for achieving those outcomes. When we buy a company, we pay present value for future expectations. And the future expectations can't be presented or fulfilled by the owner to maximize value.
That's really well said. Let me take another step on the sales piece, though. So if I want to do a transaction with you, and I'm $1 million or $2 million or whatever it is of EBITDA, if I am the owner, one of the 2 owners, and I am responsible for sales, that's my responsibility. Does that mean you're not interested in us because I'm doing the sales?
No, that's because I was answering your question.
Yeah,
you asked me what are the things I recommended that are discount factors. Those are discount factors. Why we are good as a prospective buyer for those types of businesses. One is we have the veterans. My MDs, my managing directors, usually have more credibility than the sellers' salespeople. And so they shepherd and guide and assist in generating more logos, more new business. Additionally, the Growth Lab team running that 2i3x process that I was talking about, they help figure out the solution. We don't just have to bring in a solution.
That's my question. If I can so let's say we did a transaction and we're going to build a sales function because it's critical to really accelerating. Where do the salespeople come from? Do you have them on staff and I'm going to be able to tap into that, or you're going to help me go find and hire them and pay for them?
Man, Todd, you just want me to give away all the secrets today.
I need to. This is because such a. But you would agree, Peter. It's a super. I mean, this is.
I covered it this week. So
this is the difference between a $3 million revenue business and a $30 million revenue business. Is the sales function
100%. To answer the question, I'm going to give you an attorney's answer. It depends. The reason why it depends. First is because the Growth Lab team makes that decision. It's not us. So we'll come in and the deal thesis will say the owner operator, owner sales, or 2 partners, one's fulfillment, the other one is sales. We craft with them. How are you going to achieve the vision that you haven't been able to achieve? The Growth Lab team is going to identify one of the impediments is going to be the bottleneck that the owners are. And although we're taking things like IT, HR, the administrative things off of their shoulders, they're still not professional salespeople. And oftentimes, the owner or the primary seller is looking to hire someone like them. And that's not the case. The best salespeople sell well how they sell. And owners are looking for someone who looks like them, a former agency owner or someone who has credibility. And you're like, it doesn't need to be you. It's not all about you. It can be anyone who's good at selling, who's done it before. And we have a general rule of thumb, which is we hire people who've done it well before. That's that simple.
Is that the biggest mistake people make when they're hiring a salesperson? I need somebody like me, my skill set, my capability.
That's one of the number one reasons why first-time sales roles are unsuccessful. The owners are hiring people like them, and there's very few like the entrepreneur who starts an agency, because I am one of them. We're all a little bit odd. Out of all the things you can start, you start a service business that is potentially a lifestyle business unless you accelerate and grow it. It's not something most entrepreneurs go to school and say, you know what, that service business is the category where I think I'll make the most money.
Right.
But it's definitely the biggest issue. So we hosted our event last week in Austin. We have another one in July. And it was the topic of sales.
I'm sorry. What was the event?
Scale at Speed Live is our live events to agencies.
And you bring in agency owners to that?
30 to 40 agencies come into that event. Some are in our pipeline. Some people we have LOIs with. Some are in pre-DD. Others are just to hear about the event and they want to learn. And we teach M&A, and we teach some other focused topics. So this topic was sales. Last event was raising other people's money, raising capital. And the event before that, scaling. The upcoming event's going to be exits, so with a little bit of focus on succession. And I teach this one very important, easy tactic, which you'll smell it right when I say it. If you want to hire a salesperson, go acquire a salesperson. What that means is there's another agency owner of maybe 600,000, 700,000 in top line revenue who's not going to be able to sell to someone else, but they can convince clients to buy. But they just get so pulled into client service that they can't sell every single day. But they sell, and they sell well, but they're just balancing delivery and selling. So it's feast and famine constantly, which is why they don't scale and grow. You can go do a smaller deal, acquire a company that's between 400,000 and 700,000 in revenue, take that former owner, remove all the other responsibilities and say, I will pay you well. You've never been able to focus on sales. You are solving that problem for me. And therefore, this is how the economics can work. And so,
and if I go to the Austin meeting, you're going to share these secrets with me.
That's what we share.
Wow.
We also share how to do it through the transaction.
Show notes. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you. That link will also be in the show notes.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, it's what we believe is very important as a first principle, which is the first thing we think about when we acquire a company is the next company we're going to acquire that solves one of the major problems that company's been facing for a period of time. And so if you do things so organic or incremental growth or organic hiring, things will be slower. And we don't do things very slow.
Yeah.
And so for us, we're always looking at the fastest way to do it with the highest probability. And therefore, again, it's about finding people who've done it before, that if you can get them to focus on the thing that they can do well, it yields.
So what else, when I go to the Austin meeting, if I were to go, because this is another way of asking, I think, the same question. Sales is certainly the number one thing, right?
The most frequent and number one. Yeah, that's true.
But then I would think, so if I pick that up and I get good at that, I'm leaning now into the feast and famine piece, right?
Yes.
Because
or you bring your ideal salesperson, or you bring a target. It's not just for the owners; they bring their operators, they bring a few members of their team. We make it an environment that is not just giving more responsibility and education to the primary bottleneck.
Got it. So then, because I've heard a couple things. If I can just go for the training and benefit from that, got that piece. But if I do a transaction with you guys, and now I've been acquired, and as you know, we talk about second bite all the time. The second bite, I assume, works the same way that it does with others to some degree in terms of we're going to grow the business bigger. Is it just my agency now that you are growing bigger for some second bite, or am I part of a mothership where I play a certain role in a arc of services?
We have both. So if it's helpful, in the M&A space, there is the first and second bite of the apple that comes from an isolated transaction with another entity, right? And so you've built an economic expectation that part of the purchase price consideration will come in the future performance of the company's contribution to the group or to the holding company. Now that has the expectation of someone sticking around for a bit. In AVA, we've designed a divestiture model, meaning similar to private equity, we have a term of hold where we run our accelerator, we run our program, we professionalize, put a growth lab team, resolve discount factors, and then we go to market again. And because we do that, there's typically the expectation of an additional rollover. So for those who are listening who don't know this reference, a rollover is where we take a piece of the purchase price consideration and we're rolling it into an entity that you'll still own. Now, when we divest, so all of us go to market and sell in about 2 years, the buyer is going to want us to roll a percentage. So that's 3 bites of the apple. So you have the first transaction with us. You have a second bite when we transact on our divestiture, and then there's going to be a rollover amount into another entity.
And the theory being, I went from 1 million of EBITDA to maybe 3 million of EBITDA, and then from 3 million to 8 million from that perspective. That's if you grew me myself and then divest it. What if I was a $1 million agency and I was the solution to somebody bigger? Yep. Would I become a part of that?
Yeah, in the US, we don't have this reference. Well, at least it's not that common, but in the UK it is. It's called group formation. And in group formation is essentially a micro roll-up. It's a portfolio of brands. And when you're building a micro roll-up, the micro roll-up is just a subsidiary of the holding company that's doing roll-ups. You would transact all these brands into a group. And what's interesting when you do that, you can have them convert into the mothership, right? The smaller roll-up, the micro roll-up, at a period of calculated improved EBITDA. So that's usually a 2-year term before you go to market. And so ideally you acquire, you keep in about 2 layers down, all the brands. That's how we're set up. And then 2 years later, they convert into their group roll-up. And that, which is a portfolio of brands, gets divested. And what you can do, or at least what we're able to offer, is not just the increase in value that we've been able to influence over a period of time through our program and accelerator, but also the multiple arbitrage that comes when you hit the different thresholds of EBITDA. And for those who are listening who aren't used to the threshold of EBITDA, it's typically 1 million of EBITDA is very important. That's typically when people start thinking about selling. The next one's around 3 million in EBITDA, where that multiple can be around a 4 or a 5 pretty consistently. And then when you get north of 5 million of EBITDA, you can transact 6 and 8s a little bit more confidently. And then north of 10. When you're 10 million of EBITDA, it changes the prospective buyer. And that buyer pool now will pay a higher premium for the business. And then you can it goes up as you go to 20 million. When north of 20 million, your buyers are reduced, but the value that they put on their contribution is much greater because they have to move the needle. The vast majority of buyers north of 20 million in EBITDA can't move the needle within their overall brand or on the capital markets without buying. So they must always buy. So as you're able to move up in scale, because you can be a fractured brand, but as you move up in scale, we apply a higher multiple to your EBITDA contribution, and therefore you have a greater arbitrage on divestiture. And this model's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But most of it is not taught. So it's not something that people are aware of when they're running their businesses until they start getting to the later stages of thinking how I'm going to exit.
And what I have found, whether it's somebody like AVA or private equity or a larger strategic, if they've rolled in to be that solution, is that it seems to be a lot better when somebody is thinking about that has experience thinking about, is looking for those opportunities, or as they say, where the puck will be. And for a lot of owners, that's just a big distraction to their core business and to the performance of their core business.
Yeah.
Do you find that the folks you talk to appreciate you guys managing that end of the equation for them?
The general rule in any business is if you have someone who's dedicated to a very significant contribution, you want them to be dedicated to that significant contribution.
And focused, yeah.
Yeah. So part of their attraction to us and maybe the appeal is the fact that we are focused in these very deliberate areas, and they get to join us in it. I state this with a level of repetition and confidence. It's a distraction to have to learn things all the time. And a lot of agency owners, a lot of business owners of small businesses are always learning, right? They're constantly expanding their knowledge, and that's part of the appeal. But definitely there's a lot of entertainment consumption in learning, and less productive outputs. And so you see a lot of people spinning their wheels, feeling like they're getting better, but not really yielding a great return on that time investment. So they appreciate it. Our M&A team takes care of due diligence. We also have, a significant amount of sourcing skills and resources. So when we buy a company, it's not hard for us to find another company just like it. Yeah. Also through our events, we curate just a really fantastic group of people. And although some of them resist my seductive influence when I'm trying to get them to maybe do a transaction with us, they say, Peter, not now, but yes, we would like to do something at some point. And the main bit is that it's just distracting, right? M&A is seductive. That's why you're in it, probably, Todd. It's sexy. It's way more fun than running an agency. That's for dang sure. And when you build the highest level of contribution you've ever imagined into your business, which is a transaction of 30% your size, 50% your size, equal your size, or when you buy bigger than you, which people don't know that they can do, you start wondering, why the hell do I do anything else other than this? Like this just immediately moves the needle in a way that you can't imagine if you're just operating day to day.
Yeah, when agency owners do a Pareto analysis and find out what their highest and best use is, I think they're oftentimes shocked at how little time they spend at the most productive things that help create value. I also find that and this is the reason why people like this podcast so much, is because they learn there's different ways to get to the end objective. I've had people say to me often that they didn't realize they could sell their business and then continue on as part owner in the business at a larger scale, doing more exciting things and going faster. And the reason I was excited to have you on is because AVA allows even smaller firms to find an alternative to slugging it out on their own, hoping to get to a certain level that they realize there's ceilings of complexity that arise between here and their end state or their end objective that they can't see until they keep banging their head up against it, right?
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons why we've designed the organization this way. It's just a very different impact on a community we've all been in for a very long time.
Well, it is great to see that you guys are not only in the space, because part of what we do is like to identify active buyers. That's who we represent our clients to. So that part's great. The notion of being able to provide a resource where owners can get the help that they need from somebody that's not an academician, but somebody that has actually been in the space and built real companies of scale is what I would consider to be real expertise. So I certainly will watch with great interest as AVA continues to grow and continues to be successful. The resource is 2y3x.com.
Yep.
And that's where people can learn about that service and also take the assessment and also scale at speed is Felix's book, which is also a great resource specifically for agency owners.
Yes. And we're avaacquisitions.com. And predominantly our team focuses on LinkedIn. So of course, probably similar to you, Todd, anything online, you'll find your way to us. But connect with us on LinkedIn, see the events we're hosting. We have another one in July focusing on exits. Maybe Todd will join us.
Perhaps I will. It'd be great. It's always good to be in Austin. And what better time than middle of the summer?
Middle of the summer. We'll take you to Barton Springs Pool and you can cool off. That's
fantastic. Peter, it was great having you. I appreciate you spending time, even though you're overseas. So thank you for that. Best of continued success. And thanks for sharing so openly and honestly with us.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.